A man walks into a room that will decide the fate of an entire nation. He carries with him the power to become a king, a ruler, and the courage to destroy that power. This is the story of the only man in history who conquered an empire, and then walked away from everything. His name was George Washington, and what he did next would shock the entire world and change history forever. But first, let me take you back to a time when everything seemed lost. It's the year 1776, and the most powerful military force on Earth is hunting down a group of colonial rebels. The British Empire has crushed many revolutions before. This one should be no different from the others. The odds? Well, they were impossible to overcome. The British, they had the world's most feared navy, battle-hardened soldiers, and seemingly unlimited resources. And the Americans? Just farmers with muskets in hand led by a Virginia planter who, let's be honest, had never won a major military campaign before. George Washington was 44 years old, and he was, frankly, terrified. Not of dying in battle, mind you, but of failing everyone who believed in him and his leadership. In his private letters, Washington confessed his deepest fears and anxieties. The fate of unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the courage and conduct of this army. The weight of that responsibility, it was just crushing him completely. Winter, 1777, Valley Forge. His army was starving, freezing, and dying. Men were deserting every single day. Washington watched soldiers wrap their feet in rags because they had no shoes. He saw them leave bloody footprints in the snow. That night, witnesses saw something extraordinary. The commanding general of the Continental Army, on his knees in the snow, praying for strength he didn't have, for an army falling apart. But George Washington had something the British never understood. He wasn't just fighting for territory. He was fighting for an idea that had never existed before in all of human history. The revolutionary idea that ordinary people could govern themselves, that kings weren't chosen by God, that power belonged to the people, not to crowns and thrones, forever changing history. And so this Virginia farmer did something unprecedented. He started winning battles he had no right to win. Trenton, Princeton, Saratoga. Each victory seemed more impossible than the last. The British couldn't understand what they were fighting against. This wasn't just another colonial rebellion. This was something entirely new, something dangerous, something that could spread like wildfire. By 1781, the impossible had finally happened. At Yorktown, the British forces surrendered. The most powerful empire in the world had been defeated by farmers and shopkeepers, led by a man who refused to give up. America erupted in celebration. They had won their freedom. But now came a question that would determine everything. What next? That's when Colonel Louis Nicola wrote a letter that would change history. He addressed it to General Washington, but what he proposed would make Washington something far more powerful. The war is over, but the nation remains weak. Congress has no real power. The states fight among themselves. America needs a strong leader. America needs a king. Colonel Nicola wasn't alone in his thoughts. Across the new nation, influential voices were whispering the same thing. Democracy was chaos. Freedom was anarchy. What America needed was order and stability. What America needed was King George, Washington to lead. Think about it. Congress couldn't pay the army. States were printing their own money. Trade was collapsing. The great experiment in self-government was failing before it had truly begun. Washington's army was angry. They fought for years without pay and bled for a country that seemed to abandon them. The letters, they just kept coming, from officers, from politicians, and from ordinary citizens. All saying the same thing: General Washington, save us, please become our king and lead us. For weeks, Washington struggled with the most tempting offer in history. He could have everything, absolute power, a dynasty that would last generations. His name would be remembered forever. He could end the chaos with a single word. No more arguing with Congress, no more begging states for cooperation, just pure, efficient, and unquestionable authority, bringing order and stability to the nation. George Washington remembered something others had forgotten. He remembered why they fought this war. They hadn't fought King George III just to replace him with King George I of America. They had fought for something far more precious and far more fragile than any crown. It was the idea of freedom and self-governance. They had fought bravely for the right of ordinary people to make their own mistakes, to govern themselves, and to be free citizens, not subjects of a distant crown. And so, on May 22nd in the year 1782, George Washington wrote a letter that would echo through history. I must view with abhorrence and reprehend with severity any attempt to establish a system of government fundamentally different from the one for which we have shed our blood. George Washington rejected a crown and chose something far more dangerous. He chose to trust the people. But, rejecting kingship in a letter was one thing. What happened next would test George Washington's resolve in the most public and challenging way possible. December 23, 1783, Annapolis, Maryland. Washington had been summoned to appear before Congress. The entire nation was watching closely. What would he decide to do next? Some delegates feared this was it, the moment Washington would seize power. Others prayed he would. The air was electric with both possibility and terror, a palpable tension in the room. Washington rose to speak. In his hand, he held his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, the document that gave him command over every soldier in America. With this piece of paper, he could march his army to any state capital. He could dissolve Congress. He could even crown himself. He had done harder things than this. But as Washington began to speak, something unexpected happened. His voice trembled, his hands shook. This man who had faced British cannons without flinching was now overcome with deep emotion. Having now finished my work, I retire from the theater of action, bidding farewell to this august body. I offer my commission and take leave of public life. And then he let it go. In that moment, George Washington did something unprecedented in human history. He voluntarily gave up absolute power. The room erupted with emotion. Men who had seen revolution and war were moved to tears. They had just witnessed the birth of something truly new in the world. Washington walked out of that room as a private citizen. No guards, no ceremony. Just a Virginia farmer who simply wanted to go home to his beloved wife. When King George III heard about what General Washington had done, he famously called it the greatest act in the entire history of the world. Even Britain's monarch understood the immense magnitude of what had just happened. The news spread across Europe like wildfire. For 1,000 years, men fought and died for crowns. And here was a man who had been offered one, and walked away. But Washington understood something that kings and emperors never could grasp. Real power isn't just taking what you want. Real power is knowing when to let go and walk away. That principle, that power belongs to the people, not to those who wield it, became the foundation of American democracy and governance. Every peaceful transition of power since then has been an echo of that moment in Annapolis. Every president who has ever left office voluntarily has followed the example set by George Washington. They understood that the office of the president is bigger than any individual person. That democracy only works when leaders remember they are servants of the people, not masters. George Washington could have been a king. He could have founded a dynasty. He could have ruled an empire. Instead, he chose to trust something more powerful than any crown. He chose to trust us, all of us, the farmers and shopkeepers, the teachers and dreamers. He bet everything on the idea that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. And in that choice, in that single moment of letting go, George Washington didn't just win a war. He didn't just found a nation. He proved that true greatness isn't measured by what you can take, but by what you're willing to give up for the greater good. The question Washington asked himself is the same one every generation must answer. Will we choose the easy path of letting others decide, or will we choose the harder path of freedom? Some leaders seek power, others seek to limit it. Which kind of leader will you be? George Washington chose. The question is,